SEL Day and this session on parent coaching in our SEL Day webinar, Parents, Equip Our Kids. It's a big day for SEL. If you haven't heard, the President and Governor of California have both declared this SEL Day. I know there's lots of other things going on today across the country. For people who are just joining, my name is Matthew Spohr. I'm the Director of Marketing for the nonprofit Equip Our Kids, and we advocate for social emotional learning in schools and in homes. Viewers on Zoom, you can submit questions in the chat box, and everybody feel free to post your reactions to this session on your favorite social media platform and use the hashtag SEL Day. And if you want to help get more SEL into schools, you can text the word equip to 707070 and make a donation. So in this session, I'm going to be interviewing three people who are far smarter than me on this topic. Aimee Biggs, who is a mom and a certified SEL and character development coach. Jennifer Miller, also a mom and the author and founder of Confident Parents, Confident Kids, and the co-founder of the SEL Alliance for Ohio. And Trish Wilkinson, mom and parent coach and the author of Brain Stages. So all three of you, we're going to start out by having you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how social emotional learning has impacted your own children or your interactions with them. And why don't we start with Aimee?
Thank you, Matt. My name is Aimee Biggs, and as you mentioned, I am a social emotional learning coach in the Tigard-Tualatin School District out here in Oregon. And my role really pivoted to focusing a lot on social emotional learning when we went during the pandemic and we went to virtual learning. And I am the parent of a now second grader, but she was in kindergarten during that time, so midway through her kindergarten year. And it was a big pivot, and I had to get comfortable with my emotions and my fears and my stresses and all of that so that I could help her with all of her questions and her limited experience with life, being that she was only 6 years old, and understanding that things were rapidly changing and there was no way to predict what was happening. So we had to develop some strategies as a family to honor and listen to what her real life experience was without putting on our own fears and anxieties and that sort of thing. And it's changed over the last year and a half, as it went on way longer than we anticipated. And so, yeah, I have a lot of things that I can't wait to share and discuss today in our time together.
Great, great. Jen, let's hear from you.
I am Jennifer Miller, founder and author of Confident Parents, Confident Kids. I've been working in the field of social and emotional learning for 25 years. Most of that time was spent working in schools until I became a parent myself. And around about the toddler years, I was so challenged by my son's big emotions and by my own reactions that I thought, you know, the stuff that I'm doing with teachers and schools, I really need to be doing in my own home life. And so I dedicated myself to writing a blog. Once a week, I would write about a simple practice where I was honing a social and emotional skill in myself and in my son. And 10 years later, I've been literally writing every week on that topic for 10 years. And he's now 14. And so my home has been my learning lab, but also it has generated this community of people who are striving to be confident parents, who write in and talk about and share their own experiences with building social and emotional skills in their children. So I'm very excited about our dialogue today and the other esteemed speakers that I can't wait to learn from.
Great, great. Patricia, or do you like Trish?
Yeah, most people call me Trish. I have
right.
Patricia on there because that's what, you know, the author name. It's Brain Stages, How to Raise Smart, Confident Kids and Have Fun Doing It. And I didn't even know it was social and emotional learning at the time when both of my kids have challenges. So here I had been teaching for many years. I had already taught several grades and my kids get into school and they're basically crashing and burning on an emotional level because they didn't fit the mold. And they went to the same school where I taught. So I got to see a lot of the things, you know, one daughter getting in trouble all the time because she had attention issues. And they would say, well, she's so intelligent, she could do it if she wanted to, which eventually I got a brain map done, said, according to this map that I have right here in my hand, what you're saying just isn't true. And this is why. And so these are some of the interventions we need to do. And my other daughter had all kinds of anxiety, just lots of things in the genetic soup that my husband and I didn't count on, right? So my experience was a quest to help my own children with their own social and emotional development, because they were having such a hard time. And truthfully, I didn't know what I was doing on that level. Like, I seemed to be fine and doing well in a classroom and making sure all those things, but it's different with our own children. And then when I started figuring out how to educate our children and teach our children and social and emotional learning for who they were and the techniques I was using with them, I took them into my classroom and we pretty much blew the doors off, because I had been talking to psychologists and neurologists and pediatricians and reading all these books and articles and just trying trial and error, lots of error along with that trial. But the kids knew what I was doing and why, because we communicated about it, and we would laugh together when we would try something that would just be like, big bomb, wouldn't work at all. But the things that did work, I took into my classroom and just got amazing results. And it was just so much fun. And it was actually my kids who said, Mom, you have to coach other parents and educators, because I have so many friends in their 20s that are having such a hard time adulting. That's what they call it, adulting. They said they just don't, they just don't have the skills and know how to communicate with other people. So that's what, I'm on a mission. And Jackie, the co-author to this book, we both really wanted people to understand how kids' brains develop, function, and learn. And she passed away. So I'm carrying the torch.
Fabulous. It sounds like all three of you had an aha moment where you realized that focusing on academics is not enough. Like, getting my kid to the classroom isn't enough. And maybe people out there watching this are also at that aha moment. So I'd like to hear from each of you. How would you coach somebody through that moment if they're in there now that you're on the other side of it? What did you learn that might help them?
First, I would say congratulations. For us to realize and admit that we need help, because I think a lot of times in parenting, we want to feel like, well, I shouldn't need help with this. This is a natural thing to do. I should be able to figure it out. And, somebody had to teach us how to hold a fork and, or chopsticks, whatever you use. And, somebody had to teach us to put on our clothes. What makes us think that something as important as parenting, we would just know how to do right out of the box. So I would just tell them, congratulations, and let's start with some specific things you can do right now, right here, right now.
To piggyback on that, I think many speakers have shared this today, but understanding our own emotions, right, and we have to do that in real time, right along with our kids, but recognizing and normalizing that we're all born with the same emotions. We all have access to them. We all need to understand their messages and what they're saying, and modeling that for our kids explicitly is crucial. I have found myself, when I was in the classroom for 22 years, really thriving when I had a system for different things. And in the work that I do now, we focus a lot on morning meetings and social emotional communication styles, and those work really well at home. And with a lot of the big things that have been happening, having a system, and one of the ones that has been so helpful at home is the idea of head, heart, hand. And some of the big things that are happening right now in our world, helping my second grader navigate and understand them, is really difficult and scary because of my own emotions. So we talk about, what are the facts? That's the head part. What do we know? And then how does that make our hearts feel when emotions come up for that? And then what can we do with our hands? What are the things that we can do right now to provide comfort and care for ourselves and the people around us? And I find myself going back to that a lot, head, hand, heart, for myself and for my child.
Aimee, I love that head, heart, hands. I'll build with both what both of you said. For me, I have so much compassion for parents. We have a lot of guilt about our big emotions and our big reactions. And so my message is typically, it is never too late to pause, to step back and reflect. And sometimes it really takes some time journaling and thinking through where in that moment that I don't want to repeat, what were the mashup of emotions? Because it's never just one, right? It's a mix of emotions. And then in that mashup, what part of my history are those emotions coming from? What did that trigger? How can I get to the bottom of this? Was this something that was part of my own training? I always ask, how did your parents treat this situation in your life? And what clues does that give you about your own parenting training as you were growing up? So we really need to step back and look at root causes. And when we really unpack the emotions and the triggers and think about our past and where that might be coming from, we can reinvent, we can plan for those moments when we're triggered again and say, you know, instead of I'm going to, and that can be a really powerful transformation.
I love that you said that, because there's, you know, it takes about 90 seconds for us to work through the cortisol in our brains before we can, you know, relax or whatever. So I actually, the parents I coach, I give them a little kind of mindful thing to be able to do in 90 seconds that they can also teach their kids, because we all have those emotions and we get mad at ourselves for feeling those emotions. And it's inevitable. You know, we're not robots, we're humans. So to be able to have a tool like that and just realize, okay, this is where I'm going, because how our parents raised us, our world is a lot more complicated now, and we know a lot more than we used to know. And there are people who are out there who can help us do that. So thank you for saying that, Jennifer. That was awesome.
Thanks, Trish.
So this is great. Can you give me like really specific things you noticed in your kids as you worked through this change and how you were parenting? Like, I used to see my kids do this and now they do this instead.
I'm going to jump in on this one because this is happening in real time in my house right now. My daughter has big emotions and big reactions to things, like most children do, but it can be very physical for her and very emotional for her when she has those. And so we've worked a lot on the breathing techniques and those types of things. And just last night, I really challenge parents to do something you don't know how to do with your child. Like, I'm trying to learn how to make friendship bracelets right now with her, and I'm not an expert and she's not an expert. So we're having to learn this together and both navigate frustrating emotions. And last night it just wasn't working out and I couldn't figure it out either. And she got frustrated, but then caught herself and said, I'm just going to try again, because the more I do this, the more I'm going to get it. And she stuck with it, woke up at 6 o'clock this morning and was ready to make another bracelet and try again. And it was kind of the first time without my own prompting of what she could do. She did it on her own, and that's our ultimate hope. I'm here to coach her and to help her and to coach myself. But when you start to see your child stop, keep the staircase, keep the emotion, keep the different parts of the brain communicating with each other in a positive way, then you know it's becoming internalized. And so that was a good.
Oh, that just gave me chills, Aimee.
I'm really good at friendship bracelets right now too.
Yeah, I bet they're beautiful. So my kids are in their 20s now. So I went through this before, but my kids went from getting in trouble at school all the time. My older daughter who has attention issues. My younger daughter had anxiety issues and she was wetting her pants. And basically it came from, we have all these attention issues in our family and our kids are gifted, you know, high IQ. And that sounds like, oh, bragging, whatever. It is not, because when those kids don't get their needs met, things don't go well for them. And so figuring out what that looked like was, and one of the things I taught them this, I think it came from How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. You know, that book that came out forever ago. I love those authors. And so we started doing their 6-point problem solving thing that they did. And we would do that as a family. And what was wonderful to watch them do, like Aimee was saying, is to actually have them start doing that problem solving process with each other and with their friends. So now all of a sudden they know how to communicate and they know how to solve problems. So when they start off, you know, with the sibling rivalry fighting thing, they know, oh, I actually know how to solve this problem. I know, let's sit down and talk about this and brainstorm ideas and pick a few and figure it out and see where we're going to go from here. So, and I love the whole idea of problem solving on my website. I just give it away for free. It started out a $19 mini course or something, and it's just a video and a reflection page to personalize it. And it's like, yeah, just here's a code. Everybody should know how to do this. Do it for free. Because we all need to know how to problem solve. And the before and after was like day and night, from our kids fighting all the time and, you know, because they didn't have that social and emotional learning, to, and wetting their pants at school and getting in trouble, to, you know, becoming great students, doing really well, getting along with other people, and actually being the peacemakers with their friends. I mean, just day and night.
Trish, that's incredible. I love the helping them internalize the skills so that they can use it in different settings. One technique that I teach is the peace rose between siblings, so that they learn. You make a cute little tissue paper rose and you set it in a central part of the household. And you practice. The practice is really important, right? But when you're in a conflict, the siblings are in a conflict, they hand the rose to the other, and whoever initiates, that means let's work it out. And you keep a problem solving process on the wall that you practice really simple. And they talk about each other's they own their feelings. And then they talk about the problem from their perspective, and they work it through. And it's even preschoolers have learned to use the peace rose to work through conflict. So I really love that.
I love that too. So I'm doing all the same stuff except not the peace rose. I may add that, Jennifer. That's awesome.
There you go.
I wanted just one last comment about this topic, because you guys are both making me think of all these things that I'm connecting to what your brilliant minds are saying. But this idea that in schools, we are really advocating for the explicit instruction, the explicit skills of social emotional learning being taught. And there are some places to go where you can find out what those are, but really the learning happens when we're doing it in real life. So using those social emotional skills in problem solving with a sibling. And I'm always, as a parent, you know, just looking for those practical things of ways we can practice that. And at dinner time right now, I try and have some sort of question that the three of us, my daughter's an only child, so it's my husband and I, and I've realized that what she loves more than anything, and all kids do right now, is the would you rather questions. And so we'll do something, you know, a question like, would you rather live in a home with 100 windows or 100 doors? And you can't just simply say your answer, you have to explain why. And in doing that, you know, uncovering, oh, being in a place with no windows would make me feel, you know, we just start talking about our environment, but also the emotions and the reasons behind our choices. And without even knowing that I'm doing my teacher magic on her, she's practicing and hearing, and I'm learning about my husband too, and they're learning about me. So those simple things, real life application of our skills is really important.
I love that.
And I love that you do that at dinner. You know, a lot of people have, we get so busy, and then we don't actually have dinner together all the time.
It's
And if we
hard.
can have it, it's hard, but figuring out a time when we can be together during the day at some time. We used to talk about, and we started when our kids were little, talk about our days all the way around, good things and bad things, and then discuss them. And that got to be really important because when our kids got to be teenagers, it would have been really easy to just, I have parents all the time that I coach and work with. Their kids walk in and, they say, "How was your day?" And the child says, "Fine." And then they walk away. That time I have other techniques for that, but also that time at dinner when you're talking about your day, and we wouldn't even have known what was going on half the time with our teenagers because they're so busy with their extracurriculars in school and all the sports, whatever they're doing, that if we don't create a time, be intentional about space for communication with our kids, especially when they're teenagers, that's when they become little boats because they lose their direction. They start crashing into the rocks.
Yeah. And as we were talking about earlier, the reality of it, we all have different family makeups and we all have different situations. And, some families don't have that common time together because of all the different things. And I read an article recently that being in the car is now the new dining room table. So if you don't have the time, or it's not part of your home culture to sit around and have dinner, like think of doing those things when you're traveling to and from school, or somehow in the car together, or any time that there's less distractions with technology because you're focused on something else, building those in, because it doesn't have to look the same for every family. It just can't. And we have to get rid of that expectation too.
Right. And we have to be intentional about creating some time, because if we're not intentional, sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Wow, that was great. I was thinking of the comedians in cars getting coffee. Like
Yes.
maybe we could make an SEL version of that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that would be fun. So you guys are all parents, but you're also all educators. So, beyond your kids and into the classrooms you see, what sort of changes do you see in other students that your kids may interact with and in classrooms you go in once they start taking more intention towards teaching these social and emotional skills?
I've seen powerful, dramatic changes. Truly, I've worked on facilitating change in schools, and I've also followed my son in a school where there was no SEL, and now there is SEL, and the changes are dramatic. I think we as adults underestimate providing the space to talk about issues that are top of mind for children, but don't necessarily come into the curriculum unless we're intentional about it, like bullying, like friendship, like inclusion, like listening. These are all issues that are really important in getting along as a classroom community, yet they can be missed completely if there is not a social and emotional learning curriculum in place. So, for example, there was a K-8 school where one of the students in the middle school portion committed suicide. They had a social and emotional learning program in place for years, and they had a morning meeting where they had a sacred space every day to talk about, to build trust, to create a caring learning environment, and to talk about serious issues if they needed to. So when all the parents were calling the principal saying, "What are you going to say to our children?" and really, in crisis, as a school community, the principal said, "We have a place for this. We have a structure for this. We are ready." And immediately they were able to go into morning meeting, embrace their students, talk about what was going on. There was a sibling in the younger classes, and there was a place for it. Whereas in other schools, I've seen a scramble, and do we even talk about it? And we're not ready to talk about it, and we're going to put it off and let it sit there, and then run the rumor mill where there's confusion and anxiety. And so, long story short, I really think that social and emotional learning absolutely transforms a school from top to bottom in so many ways, and you see it evidenced in children's everyday behaviors.
Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing that experience, because there are so many examples of that in our buildings. And I know I work with elementary right now in my current role. And when we did go to online learning, that was a big fear of teachers, that we wouldn't be able to create community in a virtual environment. How are we going to do that? And so that was my role, was to work with my team to create resources to help teachers connect with kids. And it was amazing how within just a few weeks of the school year starting, teachers saying in some ways they felt more connected to their kids than they ever had, because of the intentionality of making time every day. And you mentioned a very tragic situation, which is where having something in place before something happens is crucial. The day-to-day SEL experience for students, community experience for students, is based on themselves, is based on their lived experiences, their identity. We talk so much in our buildings too about equity and about making sure that individuals are seen and heard and that they feel belonging. The space for that happens with explicit instruction of skills, but also the modeling and the practice and the opportunity to exhibit those things throughout the day, so that when something happens that is tragic to an individual or to a group, they know how to have the conversations, but even just as important, they know how to listen, and they know how to make space for different experiences and different emotions and reactions to things.
And I'm so excited that this is how our society is moving towards social and emotional learning. Just like I'm so grateful for organizations like EQuipOur Kids, because we're bringing it to society's top of mind. We are familiar with this stuff because of our own experience, but to have, for example, we know that so many children have gone through trauma, and by doing these social and emotional learning exercises, because when kids come to school full of anxiety, their brains are all in the limbic system. They're all in the emotions. They can't even get to the thinking areas of their brain really in order to learn. And a lot of times we forget about this, especially if our own children don't have that kind of experience. But when our kids walk into our classrooms, we have no idea what they came from that morning. And I have learned in coaching over the years, as well as teaching for a long time, sometimes kids can come from really difficult circumstances. And by doing the social and emotional learning exercises, modeling it, saying, how would you deal with that with the kids, practicing and creating this whole base of knowledge for them that's every bit as important, if not more, than what they're learning academically, we are setting it up for our whole society to make a shift in the next generation. And that is just, I mean, when you were talking about the person who, I mean, how tragic for a parent to deal with a child taking their own life. And then for all of the kids, I mean, I was getting teary just listening to your story, and how what we're doing really matters.
Yeah.
You know, like we know intellectually it matters. The studies are showing that it matters, but hearing an experience like that, we know what we're doing is really making a difference. It really matters.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. If we look at the people that are truly successful or have become our historical heroes, the people that have created change that has had a world impact, these are people that weren't necessarily scholars. They were people that knew how, they were emotionally intelligent. They knew how to reach people. They knew how to empathize. They knew how to communicate and to listen. The people that we honor in our history, in our current, in our present, are those types of people with really, really strong social emotional skills. And if we keep drawing that out and analyzing these figures and heroes with that lens, not so much as what they did, but how did they make that happen in themselves? And then how did they inspire others? And holding that up as why this is so important and crucial. So.
And we're also kind of changing the shift in how children look at each other and how we look at each other, because we've been, for so long, our whole world has been so much in competition. And it's not that competition is necessarily bad. There's a certain amount of healthy competition, but that isn't always what we end up focusing on, right? and a lot of time. And so what we're doing is we're making a point of having children find the positive things about another classmate and having them find their own positive parts of themselves to develop their own confidence. So we're literally changing the focus, and which is, to me, that's just so exciting that we're on this whole track of just such a positive road that's gonna, I see it as opening all kinds of doors.
Absolutely. We're going to move into some Q&A now. And one of the questions that popped up used a word that I think is going to be a big word going forward, probably for years, and that's resilience. And I know Aimee specifically talks about emotional resilience. Could you guys talk about that concept of emotional resilience? What does it look like in different kids, and how can a parent foster that? You want to take that first, Aimee?
I would love to. It does start with understanding the emotions. It does start with normalizing our emotions. It does start with an understanding that every emotion has a purpose and a message. And when we're feeling big amounts of anxiety or fear, training ourselves to stop and say, why is this here? Why am I feeling it? It's a natural, it's meant to do something inside me. It's not meant to last for a really, really long time. It's meant to give me some information that I need to move forward. And if I'm not able to do that, I'm able to get help. And that's the key piece, and something that we really strive to teach our kids is that, yes, all these emotions exist in us and are normal, but when something stays around too long, what are the signs of that in ourselves? And then who do you go to? And normalizing the asking for help, focusing on mental health, focusing on mental illness. When something isn't right with how you're thinking or feeling, we need to treat it in the same way that we would if we had a physical illness or a physical situation. So part of resiliency is also teaching kids explicit coping skills, and breathing is something we all have access to. But there are a lot of other things. I was a little bit nervous and feeling some big emotions before this morning, and one of my dear friends and teammates said, start noticing the things around you. And we call this the Take 5, and it's got many names, but starting with our senses head to toe and noticing 5 things we can see, 4 things we can hear, 3 things we can smell and feel and touch, and just grounding ourselves in the moment helps to deal and navigate so that you can think more clearly. And Tricia can definitely speak more to this, and Jennifer too, about how the brain works and how accessing those brains, that if we are in a state of panic or anxiety, we only have limited access as a survival mode. How do we open the brain back up so that we can bounce back and be resilient?
And it's so exciting that we're focusing on that now. I mean, it used to be when kids would get upset, we just try to shut down that behavior and, suck it. In fact, one of the kids I coach was just telling me about a teacher. She got in trouble for misinterpreting a direction. So she did the opposite of what she was supposed to do. She got dressed down in front of the rest of the kids, sat on the bench, wasn't allowed to play the rest of the game for PE. And when she started to cry, the teacher said, oh, what did she say? Oh, it's over now. Just get over it. And we know now in social and emotional, and to be fair, I'm not poking at teachers. I know they're under so much stress, and I'm sure this teacher is probably a lovely human most of the time. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? So my only point is that sometimes we forget it's not top of mind, and we have to be, and we have to be honest with kids when we do that and teach them how to be honest about their feelings and be able to take responsibility for their feelings. Because I think a lot of resiliency, sometimes that comes from things that happen and then guilt or blaming someone else. So not being able to let it go and forgive the other person, because forgiveness is for us more than the other person. And when we can forgive and let something go, then we can move on, and just all of those things. And there are all these techniques that we can use to help kids be resilient now that makes all the difference, so they don't get stuck. So they don't get stuck in the limbic system of their brain. So that, because when kids have been through trauma, if they get stuck, then they can't move past it within that given moment, whatever it is. So their brain just kind of shuts off when we trigger. And now we have all kinds of things that we can use to get them past that so they can think.
Great. We got another question here. And Jen, people have picked up on the title of your book, Confident Parents, Confident Kids. And a lot of them are saying confident and parent don't go together for them, right? It's a tough thing. You're figuring it out day by day. So how can parents balance that feeling confident, like I've got this, with the I'm evolving every day, my kid's evolving every day, I have to accept some of that uncertainty? How do you manage uncertainty and confidence together?
What a fabulous question. Of course, I love that question. And, I named my work Confident Parents, Confident Kids because that's what I wanted in my parenting. How do I find confidence? How do I discover confidence in myself, and how do I raise it in my child? And I think it really depends on how you define confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Is confidence the loudest person in the room? Is it the life of the party? I don't define it that way. I define it as really, it requires humility. It requires a knowingness that we are all learning in a family. Not only are our children developing, but the adults are developing as well. And learning requires mistakes. It requires failure in order to improve and to hone our social and emotional development. So really, confidence is at the heart of social and emotional learning. And when I interviewed, I surveyed along with some colleagues, many parents, to ask what they wanted for their children, their hopes and dreams for their children. And they said things that you wouldn't be surprised by. I want my child to be happy. One of which was, I want my child to be confident. I want them to be responsible, kind. We looked at the alignment with social and emotional skills, and there was a direct alignment with what parents said for their hopes and dreams for their children, and for themselves, by the way. I want to be confident. And these social emotional skills that we care about, which means that in our daily interactions, we can be working toward our hopes and dreams for our children in the simplest ways. So, but again, I think it takes a lot of humility to be a student of our children, of the learning that takes place in our household.
And sometimes the confidence can just be knowing that we're learning, right? We don't have to have it all perfect all the time. We don't have to, we're not very nice to perfect people. And none of us are perfect. And so having that humility and knowing that we're learning with our children, that's where the confidence comes from. That I may make mistakes, but I know I'm going to take responsibility for that mistake, and I'm going to talk to my child about that. And I'm going to make it clear that it's okay for us to make mistakes, especially when we take responsibility for it, and that it's okay for them to make mistakes, because that's where their lack of confidence comes from. So confidence doesn't mean perfection. I think a lot of times we get that confused. Confidence means that we know that we're going to move forward, that we're going to do the very best we can, And that when we make mistakes, which we all are going to, that we're going to own them and be a good example for our kids in how we deal with those mistakes, because that's just part of the human condition. And knowing that we're going to make mistakes, but that we're going to take responsibility and, you know, use that as a learning opportunity for both ourselves and our kids. That's a lot of where the confidence comes from.
To piggyback on that, I get a lot of my confidence from, as a parent, from allowing myself the same grace that I allow my daughter, and looking at myself in the same, with the same, attempting the same loving lens that I do her, and acknowledging to myself and acknowledging to her that I have all the exact same emotions that she does. And so all those things happen in me that are happening in her, and I'm learning to understand their messages with her. And that can be really hard to do, but the more that I do that, the more grace I give myself, the more confidence I have in what I'm doing with her.
And practice makes better.
Yeah,
It doesn't
absolutely.
make perfect. I don't know who made that up, but practice makes better, right?
Yeah.
And the more we practice, and that's a lot of where confidence comes from. That's so sweet, Aimee.
Well, I can tell we could keep going and going, but we gotta wrap this up. I really want to say thanks to you, Aimee, and Jennifer and Patricia. This has been a great session. I want to remind people that they can always find other parent-friendly information, including the books we've talked about here, at EQuipOurKids.org. We've got toolkits for parents there to help start doing some of this stuff at home with their kids. We also have a toolkit there to help parents talk to their schools and their educators in their life about how can we get more of this into the classrooms that their kids are in. And this is really important. Most people may not know, but the U.S. Surgeon General, the Children's Hospital Association, and the Academy of Pediatrics have all acknowledged there's a mental health crisis for youth right now in America, and SEL can be a big part of solving that crisis. That's a lot of why we're doing what we're doing here. So again, I want to say thank you to everybody. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 minutes.